Welcome back. It's been a long time. We've missed you.
We've been imagining,
making plans,
getting ready.
Staying at home and doing our bit. We've tried our best to stay connected.
There's nothing like the feeling when we're in the room together.
It feels so good to be live again.
Good evening. You're very welcome to Dublin Theatre Festival's gala event for 2021. For the past few years, we have been honouring people who have made an outstanding contribution to Irish arts and culture, usually in person at an event, but last year with Fiona Shaw and in the preceding online, and in the preceding years we've honoured the likes of Cillian Murphy, Fergus and Rosaleen, Linehan, Friel, Stephen Ray, and I'm delighted tonight that Brendan Gleeson has agreed to accept this year's honour, and he will be interviewed by his good friend Paul Mercier. Quick introduction of Paul and Brendan. Paul Mercier, a Dubliner, a playwright, scrivener, director of stage and film, founder of the Passion Machine, who made such an important contribution to Irish theatre in the 1980s. And like his interviewee, Paul started out as a teacher, but for some reason he was brave enough or foolish enough in the 1980s to imagine a career in the arts. He and Brendan collaborated on many productions with Passion Machine. A lot of those were presented at the SFX. Brendan and Paul have also made Before I Sleep, the short film, and Studs together, as well as probably others that I've forgotten. And Paul is no stranger to Dublin Theatre Festival. Most recently, his production Railcheen played with us. But in fact, I have very fond memories at the end of the 1990s, the Native City trilogy with Kitchen Sink and Budley, a Native City, which performed at the now defunct Tivoli, if I recall correctly. This evening's honoree is Brendan Gleeson. Brendan is an actor, a musician, a writer as well. He wrote some plays for Passion Machine. And while Brendan's film career keeps him very busy, in fact, he's joining us from County Mayo, where he's making a movie at the moment that he might speak to Paul about. So Brendan's very busy with his film career, so that means it's a real treat when he does theatre projects. I was fortunate enough to see the Walworth farce a few years ago when Brendan performed with his sons Brian and Donal, and it was a reminder of what an exciting stage actor he is. As well as all of these things, Brendan is an advocate. He spoke movingly on the Late Late Show earlier on this year about the need for kindness, taking care of people. Spoke on behalf of the youth who were much maligned, I think, at that stage. Brendan has also spoken out in the past about care of people, and particularly St. Francis Hospice. But I have fond memories of Brendan in the early days of the National Campaign for the Arts and our advocacy work there that yielded such a good result last year. Brendan joined a delegation who visited a parliamentary committee in the Dáil, and the deputies were very starstruck. Were outdoing each other to establish, in their opinion, whether Brendan's performance in Bruges or the General were the finest of those that they had seen. So I'm very, very happy that Brendan has made the time and that he's accepting this honour from us, and I'm very much looking forward to his conversation with his old pal and collaborator, Paul Mercier. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Willie. God, that was very thorough. So I'll just try and add as much, or a little bit less now than because you've said a lot there for us. But anyway, look, it's a huge honour for me to talk to Brendan on this occasion. My connection with Brendan actually goes way back to An Cumann Droichearta, which is the Irish language theatre society or drama society in UCD. And so our immediate connection and our very early connection from the get-go was theatre, and theatre in the Irish language. And we believed that we could change the world too, even through theatre in the Irish language at the time. So it was quite an exciting time. And that, of course, led to lots of other things. But you'd be surprised just how much theatre generally and stage work that Brendan was doing before he went anywhere near film or TV, or for that matter, professional theatre. Yes, there was the Passion Machine, but Brendan also wrote for the company. He wrote and he directed, and his commitment and level of collaboration and encouragement for other artists has been pretty intense and dynamic and has been consistent all this time. And the spirit in which he works and the support and loyalty he shows to writers and directors and his collaboration with his fellow actors is kind of done in a way that we all expect of, we all try to emulate or try to kind of follow through in theatre. It's great that the Dublin Theatre Festival is paying him this tribute. The Theatre Festival is, after all, the big light that shines every year. It is the hope, the inspiration, the provocation, and the validation of everything that we do. And it is a festival of possibility, a showcase of what is possible in theatre and why theatre at all. And Brendan represents that. He shows us what is possible. He represents Irish theatre, and not just Irish theatre, he represents a theatre for all, telling stories for everyone, which I guess is one of the reasons why he does film and why he took that path and why we now join him somewhere in the Wild West, where he is making another epic. How are you, Brendan? How's it going? I knew I would forget. I didn't have a cue sheet, so I knew I'd forget all of that, so I had to write it down. I'm getting old.
Well, I'll tell you what you're doing, Paul. You're almost guaranteeing that I'm speechless. I've nothing to say after that. But it's lovely, and thanks very much to Willie as well. It's very nice to hear all that stuff, and brings me back a bit.
Anyway, congratulations, Brendan. And I'm going to cut to the quick actually on this. You know, I tried to mention theatre and film in all in one go there, and to kind of some way make the connection there. You know, I mean, it's a very loose connection, and there are lots of other connections. But for you now, from the outset, what do you think is the difference between theatre and films?
Not an awful lot, except I remember having a discussion with Donal O'Kelly, who is another extraordinary sort of servant of theatre and a recipient of the wonders that theatre has to offer. No more than yourself, Paul. And he at the very beginning, I remember saying to him, we had done with the Pash Machine a few massive, mind-blowing kind of extensions with, you know, shows that moved from the SFX to Olympia and then went on for 10 weeks and then got another thing and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, you know, we were up to 30 or 50,000 people or something that we were seeing. And I remember chatting to Donal and saying to him, you know, if you make a film, you can reach the same amount of people in, you know, a weekend as you can in that whole, whatever, 10 or 20 weeks that we had been on theatre. And that if you know, and he said, yeah, but will you have anything left to say by the time you do it? Which was brilliant. And always a question I asked myself, always, is what is the point of doing it? And like, so for me, it is access. And then when I found out that I was given access to doing some film with Sarah, with a degree of kind of, with the people that I was lucky enough to meet, like John Borman and the artists within the industry.
Yeah.
And I understood the challenges of it, and I understood the possibilities of the intimacy of it.
Yeah.
I love it as a form, and it is different in terms of acting and the process of it. It's very much, you know, I always remember Michael Caine talking about, you know, that, you know, you use, you know, a chopping board with theatre sometimes, and then sometimes you bring it right down to whatever, you know, tweezers. But in cinema, you have to go right down to a laser because the camera is so close that everything has to be so minuscule. And, you know, it sounded a little bit. The great thing about him is that he wasn't being. I was lucky enough to meet him, and he's the most natural sort of guy that you can meet, and he was being entirely serious. But I took it very seriously at the time, because I remember finding out that, for example, even ordinary facial expressions, my face tends to take its own little journey around the place, and it can give a very wrong impression on camera. And so so I found I had to calm it down a little bit. So all of that, but fundamentally, to be honest with you, like, I don't see any, like, the mission is kind of what you're doing with it is an artistic expression by way of, like, I've learned from everybody I worked with to a greater or lesser extent. Sometimes I learned what not to do, and then other times I learned so much from people like Sean McGinley and people like that who and, you know, Gary Hines, yourself, all the, go right through the whole thing.
Yeah.
About, you know, Sean had a great reverence for the writer, and he would say that you are the conduit of the writer, and that, you know, you try to serve the writer's intent. Yeah. And I have a slightly different relationship with that, particularly when it crosses into film, because sometimes the dialogue is very secondary, and they're expecting people to make their own of it. So it's a very interesting kind of a thing. But fundamentally, there are three elements. There is the writing and the imagination of it, and then there's the serving of that to the audience, and the audience is the third. And without any of those elements, nothing happens in theatre or in cinema. There is no, and like, even at the moment, the theatrical nature of cinema that's been taken away with COVID and stuff like that, where people aren't, well, they're starting to go back now to cinemas and communal. I find that a loss, because like, you know, as we know, the huge challenges that theatre are facing and have faced with COVID, and now that they're starting to, you know, re-emerge, the thrill and the importance of a communal viewing, the communal experience of whether it's stage or screen, is massive. You know, I had a look at medicine. Donald, my son, was doing medicine down in Galway, and I was lucky enough, we were able to get off, we were on Inishmore and having a beautiful time over there, and I was able to get into Galway and to watch it, and they had just opened up into 60%. And I mean, I had seen a live stream of it before, you know, when there was work in progress, and just the difference between that and the interaction of having an actual live audience.
Yes.
This is not so fundamentally. I mean, you know, the rambling on about. I fundamentally don't agree with the big. I think it's an artificial divide between theatre and film. I think for me, it's about access.
Yeah, do you think, Brendan, given what you're saying there, do you think that there's still in this country, I mean, because I don't know what's happening anywhere else, but that in this country, given that theatre is such a huge cultural activity in this country, and has been there long before we really developed the film industry as such, you know, but that there is a kind of a wall or a friction between the two art forms in this country? I
think it's artificial. I absolutely don't see it. It's like the difference between North Dublin and South Dublin. It's only made up by people who wanted to be there. It's a completely imaginary wall. The only difference, there are huge financial differences in terms of how you can make your living as a theatre operator exclusively. And that's why most people will try and have some sort of interaction with film, because generally you'd be just paid better. And one of the reasons you'd be paid better is because it goes to an awful lot more people, and it's just market forces up to a point where they say, look, if you do that long run of 10 weeks and you talk to 30 or 50,000 people, and this film goes out to 60 million, there's going to be a difference in the pay scale. So this wall is complete nonsense, except for the fact that they are definitely, in terms of the craftsmanship that's required, I'm speaking in terms of actors, that in terms of acting, for me, there's no wall, other than they are two very, very different prisons, and that you must learn the craft of both if you're going to operate in both. You know, and there's no point in going home and like talking as if you're, you know, talking to a tissue in front of your mouth. If you're in a theatre and you're supposed to hit the back wall with the dialogue so people can actually understand what you're saying. It's a ludicrous thing. And a lot of people find it different to make. And also small, intimate gestures. Some of them carry to an audience way down at the back. A lot of them don't. And so, you know, the great beauty of trying to craft a theatrical performance is trying to find the level where it's not overbearing. I hate people who roar in theatres. I always feel assaulted by somebody who overdoes the projection. And at the same time, if you're talking as if you're, you know, in some sort of a gangster movie, and I say, what is he saying? Like, I always remember doing the doing a matinee performance for some old age pensioners. You know, I am now and so I'm not being in any way. I can be ageist, right? Because it's about me. But all I can hear out of, you know, all I can hear during the whole second half is, "What did he say, May? What did he say, May?" And then you'd be just waiting for May to say, "I couldn't hear them." And worse, if she did hear them reenacting what had just happened 5 minutes before. But it's like there's always a kind of a balance. Yeah. But you do have, like, it's a huge craft, theatre craft, in terms of how to impart and how to emote properly to the proper level. And you go to film, you have to re-educate yourself. But if you go back to theatre again, you will find that whatever you've taken on board in that regard will not serve you too well in the theatre either. The one thing that will serve properly, which has been very important to me, and one of the reasons I want to do it, like, I do feel a little odd, this celebration, given the amount of other people who have spent lives in theatre with, you know, the film has been my main thing for the last couple of years, but, you know, so I feel a bit, I feel a bit odd, but one of the things I wanted to do was to express how much theatre gave to me, and that's the real reason that I wanted to. I mean, this is thrilling for me. It's my hometown. Theatre has been very basic to me my whole life. My mother being the chief influence on that. Yes. She was a huge theatre goer, and she used to write little notes, never bad, on the programs in the Abbey and the Gate and something, you know, superb performance. And she was, I have some programs from her, yeah. My biggest regret was ever not introducing her to John Kavanagh or looking, you know, she was, she would give me it, would you autograph my thing? I said, "Man, don't be doing that in first, you know, embarrass me." Like a teenager, I was in my 30s, like. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to do is to emphasize in terms of how much theatre has given to me over my life, like, it's first of all, in the terms of film work, like, I can't imagine not having done theatre in terms of trying to craft a performance when you shoot out of shot, or you shoot out of sequence, sorry, no chronology. The basis for everything that I do in film, and the reason I love doing bigger parts in films, is the crafting of a performance too. And that's all from theatre. You have to, you have to craft the thing. The 4-week rehearsal, like in this one we're doing now, I'm working with Martin McDonough, who also writes for theatre, hugely, and has been massively sort of impactful in theatre. And we did 2 weeks rehearsal. And I think the whole idea of the wall is, I do think it's a man-made construct. It doesn't exist. And for me, it shouldn't exist. We're all trying to impart and share with the greatest amount of people possible. And both have massive strengths, and theatre is absolutely fundamental to everything as far as I'm concerned. And I agree with you about this country. There's something very, very ingrained in our culture identity that is drawn towards theatre.
Yeah, I wondered sometimes, that would say way back, Brendan, when I first met you, and really the only platform for us at that time, and the only outlet for us at that time was theatre. It wasn't TV now, and it wasn't film, because we did the means of production weren't available at that time.
No.
You know what I mean? It just was not happening. But I'm just wondering if the means of production were available then, and if those opportunities were available, if we could get our hands on a camera, and look, the way things are gone has absolutely revolutionized the whole process. Would we have gone near theatre at all? I wondered about that,
I did. I would have anyway. I mean,
you would. Yeah. Well, I knew you. Yeah.
I was already doing it before. Like, we were doing.
Yes, you were. You were doing with Joey's and everything. You were doing lots of stuff.
Yeah, a bunch of us from Joey's. Two of the lads who were more kind of proactive than me, kind of got a few of them together and started up and asked me would I join, which I was delighted to do. So we started doing stuff on an amateur level. the naivety of youth. I remember like doing Crack's Last Tape when I was like 18 or 19 or something, and like, you know, jumping into an old man's shoes, and you know, I
Brendan,
remember
what age were you? Brendan, what age were you when you did Biff and Death of a Salesman? What age would you have been?
21 or 22, I suppose.
Well, you weren't stepping into an old man's shoes there. You were playing the character. You were the character.
Oh, I was there, but Crap's Last Tape, I was supposed to be an old man, and we got a wig of somebody, but we couldn't get a proper grey wig, so we got an old. We got somebody's wig, and what colours things white? Talcum powder. So halfway through the thing, I'm listening to this tape, and I'm doing this, and I'm scratching my head, and there's this cloud of talcum powder goes flying above. Much I didn't know about it, but I was told about it afterwards. But our mothers thought we were great, and we did it in Joey's Hall, in the primary school hall, and I don't care, but there were a couple of times, you know, you'd be going through all sorts of things at that age, and those magical times, those weekend was the only time you could launch it in Joey's primary hall in Fairview, and you'd get your friends and all the rest would come down, and they had the same magic as anything that's happening now. I don't care what anybody says, and there were bits and bobs that weren't great, or there were bits and bobs that were really exciting, and it was all part of the package, and it was thrilling. I always the theatrical experience for me was always basic, and again, I think the respect for it always came. Again, my mum was a theatre goer. She loved all that stuff. She didn't get involved herself in any way other than to go and support things, and she'd support things locally if she could or whatever. But so yeah, like I do think that I can see kids now, for example, taking, you know, you can get a video camera or whatever it's called nowadays, and just do it fairly quick, fairly easily. You can do it on an iPhone. You can start your own films and doing all that. I think there's a little bit of a missed opportunity in some of the arts things that we have around before COVID obviously put the kibosh on it. But I do think that one of the things we did get we got a couple of roads out of the 30 billion that we blew, or that the lads blew. We got a few very nice local theatres and art centres, which I would love to see. I think there's a place, I'll never forget the exhilaration of the Passion Machine, and yourself and John Sutton and what you did, and Roddy and all the guys and everybody involved in it, in terms of bringing the theatrical experience to people who would not go, did not understand anything about it. And you wrote stuff that was extraordinarily pertinent to their lives. You wrote about the suburbs. You didn't write about the inner city or the countryside or the west, or you know, you wrote about suburbia, where most people live, actually, when it comes down to it. And we went out there, you went out there, and the whole marketing thing was part of it. You went out and you flooded dole offices, and you went to places and community centres, and you gave out all sorts of kind of complimentary things to get people in. And once you got in, they were entertained. They were entertained and became a phenomenon inside of, I'll never forget that time. It was the most exhilarating. Nothing comes close to it in terms of like, there have been thrills all along the way with this. I can't believe I actually got to do this for a living. But like, you know, you don't, it's like apples and oranges. You don't say, I would not say one experience ever topped that stuff. You know, I've had such thrills over the time, but actually coming, having that communication with people, where people, I can never forget. And it was reenacted when we went back and did the Walworth Farce. We did the Walworth Farce in the Olympia for a reason. And one of it was that there is nothing like the Olympia when a wall of laughter comes back at you from the gods down to the end, down to the stalls. It is unbelievable. And the feeling of community and having reached and just having hit the sweet spot. And there's so many people involved in it. You know, there's thousands of people in that particular event at that particular moment have collaborated to make that explosion of laughter, or you know, or of empathy. Of deeply troubling empathy sometimes. It's such a cathartic thing. The word catharsis comes from theatre. It's such a liberating thing. And any actor, I would say, to any actor who wants to be an actor because they want to be an actor, not because they want to be famous, should should involve themselves in theatre when they and if they can. It's very difficult to do both, just from availability, because theatre is much longer terms. You tie yourself down to stuff, you know. Braveheart nearly didn't happen because I went with, which was a thrill in itself. We went to Chicago with, I think it was Juno.
Juno and the Peacock, was it, Brendan?
Yeah, and I lost the part. Because I was 2 weeks out. I'd been Mel said we're going to start now. Okay, I should be finished. And then he said, we gave me a date, and we were going to Chicago for 2 weeks. And I said, look, I can't, but I'll see if I can make it. And then they couldn't recast it, and I had to tell him I can't do the part. And so, like, then he said, we jigged around. You were on.
So you had to tell Mel you couldn't do the part.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't want to.
But he had seen you in Juno and the Peacock.
Yeah, I know. But I didn't want to. I felt it would be dishonorable to jump. I had committed to the other thing, really.
Yes, of course, and you were great in it, yeah. And it was a great show.
Yeah, it was important, kind of a thing, and
it was great.
But at the same time, I kind of felt this opportunity won't come again either. Yeah. And surely to get somebody, and it was all that stuff. But in the end, I went, and lucky enough, but I was blessed. They just rejigged. They said, there was a couple of things, you're only sitting around the horse or something. We can leave you out of it. I said, that's what I'm doing for most of the film anyway. But, no, but I mean, that was a big thing for me, and I would have lost it. And so trying to make the thing work for anybody in the modern age, trying to make the two things work is very difficult. And if some people are beginning to think, or if some people get the impression that it's because people don't respect theatre and don't want to go back and do it. In my case, I know with the lads as well, it's just really difficult to kind of work it around because the stretch is so far ahead of time. You know, you take yourself out of the game for so long.
Yes.
And then, and you know, it just becomes, it's really a logistical problem.
I remember you saying to me once, Brendan, I don't remember what it was, but you know, having done so much theatre, and like, I wouldn't underestimate the amount that you did, but it got to a point where one of the joys of filmmaking, you said, is that once you did the scene, you didn't have to look at that piece of script again, right? And you just could you just throw that away, you know. Whereas in theatre, you held on to it, because there's this funny dynamic, isn't it, in theatre, that even though you do a show, you kind of know that there's going to be another night, and there's going to be another performance. There might be an extra line, but there might be.
Yeah, listen, I'm just after writing. You don't mind saying that tonight as well, would you?
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean,
I'm looking at anybody now, Paul.
Who are you talking about there, Brendan?
What? Yeah, you wouldn't mind it. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I went to Paul Greengrass, did the same to me in film, so it's not just you either. But I love working with I love working with new writing. By the way, that's a huge thing, and even in anything that I love working with new writing. And sometimes, the thing is, in theatre, you perfect as you go along. In film, you try to do as you do, the take, and then you do the edit, and then so they're the ways that you hone and try to perfect. In theatre, you always try, at least I've always tried, to find something that you hadn't seen before as you go through the performances. But I don't like...
Isn't there something about the audience, Brendan, that now that you mention it, that sometimes the audience can influence the performance, can't they?
Yeah, well, they can, and it depends on, you know, who's driving what. I remember doing the double bass in Andrews Lane, Pat Moyle's Baby, and Mauro Higgins was directed, and that was a great thing, because I'd just gone full time. It was a one-man show, and it really did sort out the men from the boys type of thing. I'll never forget the terror of it at the start. And
playing the cello as well, weren't you?
Pardon?
Weren't you playing the cello as well?
I was letting on to play the double bass. Do you know why?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
That's why it's called the double bass. but it was.
You played
was
like
a bow.
cello.
There
No,
was
you
a
played
bow,
like
and-
a cello. Sorry, bro.
I mean, it looked like a cello. But I was trying to play. Now I'm glad that was not on film, Paul. Me trying to play the double bass. But anyway, it was like. But I went for it anyway. God love it. But no, but I always remember just after the first. I had an escape route the first night. Your man used to drink a beer, and I said, right, if I dry, I'll just say, oh, my beer's finished, you know. Because he did make one little quick exit and get another bottle of beer, and so that was my out. And one, so I blanked. Wow, it's going to dry it completely. And I went in next door, went off in to say, where am I? What am I doing? You skipped that and you went back over that. So you're grand here if you start there, back into it. So I went back in. I never needed it again, because what happened within that was the power between the audience. I remember going in and seeing the people's shoes. Andrew's name was Tiny.
Yes.
And I could see the people's shoes in front of me. There was no difference. There was no sort of step up. You were on the same level as they were, and you're on the stage with them, and they were in the same room. And I remember noticing their shoes as I went over to them. So you look down at what you think is the floor, and you can see a packet of Maltesers sticking out of somebody's bag or something. So it was all very immediate. But the power shift during that thing was very, very interesting, because I found that I began to actually have a power trip with it a little bit, because I kind of said, okay, nobody else can mess up here. Yeah. And if I feel I'm losing them in a particular area, I can kind of inject a little bit of energy. Or if I find that it's all running away with itself, I can kind of hold back a small bit and just bring them in a little bit, move a bit more upstage, and try and get it a little bit more intimate, because the next piece, they need to be quieting down a small bit. And so who's driving who at some point is like, it's always better, I feel, if you're kind of listening and responding, rather than, and that you are kind of in control. Pam Brighton said to me one time, if you go on theatre and you're taking people's imagination on a 2-hour loan, you have a great responsibility. Yeah. Because people are handing their soul over to you to mind for a while. This whole idea of suspension of disbelief, it's not just that. It's suspension of what's the word? It's suspension of
well, I mean,
shyness or their own self-protection, if you know what I mean.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
So in other words, the way that you protect yourself, the way your inner feelings are protected. The word is just on the tip of my tongue, but it won't come to me. But it's, the kind of things where you feel I'd be a little bit, I wouldn't want to talk about that. Theatre can open that up. You have somebody's heart in your hands here.
Yes,
if you do it properly. And you have somebody's soul where you're trying to say, there's an empathy going on here, or this is something that might have touched you in a particular way. And so the responsibility of it is huge,
Yeah.
And so I've always kind of felt that that's.
But all the more daunting, Brendan, in that case, because you were the only actor on stage.
Well, that's where you feel you really need to mind it, and that's where you feel sometimes a bit stronger. It's like when you have a child, you kind of feel that, okay, in one way it's so scary, in another way you kind of feel empowered to protect and to make sure, in as much as you can, that you do what you can do. You know what I mean? You try to make the thing work.
Yeah.
So in terms of whether but like in terms of the running and how you try, you're searching for other things in a performance by performance, but you're always trying to hone your own part. But the main thing is to mind the people who are there at the moment.
Well, that leads me, Brendan, to ask you then about, during COVID, which was, the Abbey Theatre series that they did of the one acts, or I don't know what exactly you would call them, but the short plays that they did. And you did one that was written by Pam Boyd, now, for example.
Oh, yeah.
So Pam's piece, was that all in its entirety? Was it just one performance in its entirety, like a stage performance that was filmed, or was it done in a kind of a staggered way or anything like that?
No, I think No, I think it was done in. I think it was done in one.
Yeah,
We did it.
yeah.
Do it in one.
And how did that feel, Brendan?
Pardon?
What was that experience like? Because now, if you're either talking to camera or you're talking directly, but it's a kind of it's somewhere. Is it somewhere in between theatre and film? Is that a dimension in itself?
Well, I was just talking to Willie briefly there as well, Willie White, about that. And I think we have a new hybrid coming in now. From I think it had started to happen a little bit, but I think it's been kind of pushed forward by COVID, whereby a lot of people were starting to put out the live streaming thing, and they were doing a performance with regard to where there was an awareness of camera.
Yeah.
You know, Mike Breen and Marie Mullen did a brilliant sort of piece, and
yes.
it was very camera savvy, but it was to an audience. And I find that a very interesting hybrid. I think there's something to be explored in it. I don't think it should be explored separate to a stage play, in the sense that I think it'd just be very interesting to see where it goes. But Willie needs people to go to theatre to keep theatre alive. And I think, so if it's, I think that is, we mustn't forget what an actual audience does. Yes. So what was happening with those performances during COVID was, it was like you were doing it. I remember we did actually Home at one stage. We filmed a few scenes from Home.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And we did it, but I do think that the element of an audience in a play should not be lost.
Yes.
You know, yes. And that the live stream is always, for me, it's a substitute. But I do think there is a hybrid thing that's there that will be interesting to explore.
Yes.
And I'd like to see it done as part of theatrical. I think they're doing it in England quite a lot now anyway. They're starting to live stream shows, the various shows that go on in the theatres for a while. And there's an extra funding possible through that for people who couldn't get into the theatre.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be afraid of it. I'd embrace it. And I didn't act for 2 years one stage where I saw a filmed production that we had done, because I thought I was so over the top that I was crap. It was just a camera set at
straight on
stage, and it was just a single camera, and it was like mortifying.
No. That doesn't do justice to anything, Brendan. That wouldn't do anybody any justice. No.
I know, but I didn't know that at the time. I just thought I was crap. So, which is possibly, but I know that when the audience was in there, you're interacting with the audience, and it's a completely different animal. So it's a very interesting sort of I think you can combine the two. I think you can combine the two properly, but that you have to understand maybe for some of the stuff, maybe having a camera savvy production of one night where the audience does not need to see it from start to finish would be no harm.
Yes.
You know, and you could do it like some of these where they had live audiences and televised programs and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I think it can be part of funding for theatres if it's done properly. And that I think people should try to keep it in as much as they can, where an exciting production like that gets live streamed so people can get to see it, and it can be, people are finding out. Anne Clark has done a lot of work even with medicine. I was watching Donna's Medicine the other day. I was just mentioning that, and that had a live stream element at the end of it. So
yes, and even in the case of Donna's performance, there was an element there towards the end. Well, I know this is a kind of a spoiler alert, but towards the end, when things get fairly dramatic, that what the camera was doing at that point at the end of Medicine was kind of responding to what was actually happening on stage. So I kind of felt that's really good. That was pretty savvy. That was very good. And actually, it actually in a way compensated for what you missed by being in with an audience as you were when you were watching the actual show itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a certain transference, but it's never the same. It's like
it's never the same. But it's almost like it is a whole.
I do think it's good.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, actually, Brendan, that brings us to another point I just wanted to make. Now that we're talking about the COVID situation, but I mean, you have touched on, but it's just that we just want the difficulties that theatre is facing. And I mean, in a way, film has had a kind of a head start. Theatre has taken longer to get back. So there's a huge uncertainty still there. And of course, as you mentioned at the beginning, and as Willie mentioned, that the theatre really cannot see itself going back to capacity for a long time. So we're going to have to adjust. But just to say that the actual theatre festival has a kind of a scheme or a kind of a campaign to raise money for theatre for the future to help mitigate the problems that have been caused by COVID, you know. And it's called,
well, I mean, it needs a certain, I mean, you know, the old banks got a few bob, didn't they? And we all know that everybody needs an economy. But I think at this stage, we all know that everybody needs theatre too. Like, one of the things what I was kind of pleased about is that I do think that COVID has allowed people to see the importance of the arts in general, that it's part of the fibre of life. It's you know, we obviously need to be fed and clothed and have shelter, which is obviously not happening either too easily these days. And if you can get into a place where people are fed and sheltered, you know, engaging the mind and the heart and the soul the way theatre and the arts in general do is of vital importance. It's part of what makes us human, and it should be inbred in a way that the French have been doing it since time immemorial, where it is part of what is necessary for life. So at the moment, you know, the spaces in theatre are difficult because even if you're allowed 60% capacity, sometimes the building with sort of distancing and things like that. But I don't see it's going to be for, like, we're over 90%, you know, or whatever it is at the moment, double vaccinated. I don't see why people who are double vaccinated can't congregate, you know, more easily than people maybe feel. I think audiences can be, and obviously ventilation and things like that have to be looked at. But I wouldn't be as pessimistic. But Willie and the guys are dealing with reality, so I'll take it from them. But I think first of all, we have to put it in as part of our living expenses, is that our mind is occupied.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to turn into a bunch of dullards. Yeah. Or we're going to find the suicide rate climbing even higher than it will. Yeah. We need outlet, and we need community, and we need confluence of emotion and understanding of emotion. And one of the big things that can come from COVID, as far as I'm concerned, is this understanding that we're all even socially inept now. So let's just start from that. And so even the socially inept before COVID are part of the gang, because everybody's socially inept. So. And we're all a little bit tender, you know what I mean? And we're all a little bit institutionalized too.
Yes.
So I'm not going out. Why would I bother going out for? I should only have to come back in again. You know what I mean? It's like so I think the arts are huge in bringing that out and allowing us to kind of express all that. And theatre is, as you say, like, it's so visceral, it's so kind of immediately accessible. And as I say, the thrill of what happened in the 80s, and the reason, you know, I'm enjoying this celebrating this with you, Paul, because the reason that the 80s, seeing people who didn't normally go to theatre going to theatre was one of the most thrilling things in my life. And I think that can happen again. I think younger writers and directors and people like that, and producers, if we can get producers, should start looking at what is there. I think people are thirsty in a way they've never been thirsty for expression, for that feeling of empathy, that feeling of understanding of other people's joy and distress and everything, and ordinariness. And that ordinariness is the best thing going sometimes, when you suddenly realize that everybody's on the same bus. It's like, it's a wonderful feeling to go to theatre. And I do think there's a huge, I think first of all, the government should take it as a given that in the same ways that you have to pay CAP and you have to pay, you know, food subsidies for certain things, in the same way that the homeless are going to have to be homed, we have to have the arts as an intimate living part. And so they're going to have to start pumping money into it to get us over the COVID thing. But also, I think the artists and themselves are going to start getting more imaginative about the way that they attract people and what we're doing in front of people to say, listen, this is a must see. You're losing out if you don't get in and see it, because it's going to be difficult. Everybody is shy about going out again and will be over the next year or two. But I do think it's the salvation of a lot of, everybody is becoming more and more aware about mental health. And I think mental health is to be found in a theatre.
Yeah. And ironically, Donald's in a show about mental health, and it is powerful. It's a powerful kind of a powerful experience for people. I mean, it is. It's great,
I was very upset watching that.
But it was
like I could hardly talk for 3 minutes, and then I was exhilarated by it.
Yeah, but it was a cathartic as well. I mean, and that's exactly what
That's exactly it.
Anyway, Brendan, we could talk all night. Honestly, we're going to have to end it shortly. But I just want to say that just on that score, that campaign that the Dublin Theatre Festival are doing to help with the COVID situation is called Future Stages, to invest money into whatever it's going to take to open all the theatres and bring people back, just as you say, Brendan. And so look, obviously they're looking for donations and everything, and any help that people can give would be great. But look, Brendan, it's a huge honor to talk to you. You're brilliant, man. You're absolutely brilliant. I think you've earned your award. So I'm going to present it to you here now, right? So it's very, very happy.
That's like.
So there you go. Yeah, it's coming in from there.
Would this be it?
Okay. Yeah. Congratulations, Brendan.
Listen, thanks a million.
Congratulations.
It's beautiful, Seamus McGill's sculpture. It's very beautiful. It's very, it's treasured. And as I say, I feel it's more what theatre has given to me rather than what I've given to theatre. But what I have given to theatre has all been just a very fulfilling gift. And I think I do, it means an awful lot to me, this. And I'd like to thank everybody all down the years whom I've collaborated with and who've collaborated with me and shared wisdom with and found things out from and, had great joy with, and wish everybody the best. And I think this will make us stronger. I think this COVID thing, we're beginning to understand the necessity of what happens in a theatre. I do think that is happening. So as we say, we'll appeal to people now to try and keep them supporting it.
All right, brilliant, Brendan. Thanks a million.
All right, and Paul, thanks very much to you.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and back to the Dublin Theatre Festival. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.